a topic that has been front of center for many recently. We're talking about surveillance cameras, particularly surveillance cameras that are available to residential and commercial consumers. It is a topic that you have likely seen in your own lives at work and right here in Atlanta. Back in September of last year, the Atlanta Police Foundation said that there are more than 20,000 surveillance cameras as part of a network of video and other surveillance technology that provide the Atlanta Police Department with information in real time. And in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Savannah Guthrie, who's now been missing for nearly 2 full weeks at this point, law enforcement this week released what, at least publicly, may be the biggest new development of the case so far, when they released surveillance camera video that initially law enforcement said was unlikely to be recovered. This week, FBI Director Kash Patel said that videos were recovered from a, quote, residual data located in back-end systems. And those images showed a person who is a possible suspect in the case that remains ongoing. To give us more context on all of this, we're going to bring in Matt Saylor right now. He is the CEO of IC Realtime. And Matt, you have extensive experience in the surveillance industry, right?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. I do. We've been doing this for a little over 2 decades now.
And Matt, let's start here and ground our conversation in your background. Can you tell me a little bit about your company, IC Realtime, and what y'all do?
Yeah, we manufacture software and hardware components that make up the full ecosystem of video surveillance, from the cameras to the servers and cloud storage, processing, archiving data.
Let me ask you this, and this is a question I suspect a lot of people have been wondering this week. When you saw that those still images and the video captured from a home surveillance camera outside of Nancy Guthrie's home were released, when you saw that they had been recovered, what was your first reaction?
It seems normal that they would probably store some residual data on the servers in the cloud. The time period in which it took to retrieve the data seemed a little bit of an elongated time period. If the data was there, it would probably be accessible immediately. My best guess would be that law enforcement probably reached out very quickly, and the data site, the cloud storage site, probably had the residual data, and maybe they put that into a container, as they call it, and maybe the elongated time period it took to which retrieve the data was based on maybe legalities, would be my best guess about them actually handing over the data. I don't know the ins and the outs of the legalities around the company and how they share their data. That would be my assumption, but it is quite normal to have a cloud system have residual data that is stored for brief periods of time when you're using cloud storage.
And let's talk about that a little bit. And obviously, understanding the ins and outs of this ongoing investigation are not all public at this point, which is commonplace. But talking generally about residual data, what is residual data for somebody who's a non-technical viewer here, like myself? What is residual data, and how long is it held on servers belonging to or related to the companies that make and operate these cameras?
In layman's term, residual data is short-term data that would sit on a server or a cloud ecosystem, and that would be for different reasons. Like a low-level example would be if you had a camera that did not have onboard storage, and that camera was only able to archive if you had a cloud subscription. Let's say that your internet went out, it would have a small amount of residual data on the camera level in order to retain the video that it was capturing until the internet came back up and the stream could be provided to upload it to the cloud. That would be like kind of a low level example, but in the question you're asking, in the cloud infrastructure, residual data is generally a short-term amount of data that would be stored in the cloud and then overwritten once a certain time period elapsed. Those time periods vary.
And for somebody who may be watching this and may be thinking, as is sometimes the case, they don't have a subscription to the company, they don't subscribe to a service where that their footage is recorded and accessible to the end user, I suspect some people may hear this and think, huh, I didn't know all of this was being stored. What would you say to an end user who may raise some potential privacy concerns to all this?
You know, it's been an area of concern for some time. The equipment that many of the professional companies sell do not store any residual data. It's more of a consumer problem, it appears. Generally, the best thing I could say and recommend to anybody watching would be try to own your data and store your data on site if you did want to get a simple kind of consumer product like a doorbell camera. Try to get one that has an SD card built in, and therefore your data doesn't have to transmit to the cloud. As a matter, there's plenty of hardware solutions as far as video doorbells, for an example, that do have an SD card. They do not need a cloud plan. Your data is stored locally. It is on site, and you have no risk of what you're seeing now.
And the other component of all this, of course, is law enforcement and law enforcement access to these recorded images and videos, the residual data, all of this. What kind of access and what kind of steps do law enforcement entities have to go through in order to obtain access to this footage from the companies that operate these cameras?
I'm not an expert in this field, so I don't want to comment on something I'm not well versed in. From my personal dealings, we have dealt with law enforcement in the past many times. Generally, they would need permission from, let's just say this case, the homeowner or the owner of the equipment in order to access that data. But I don't want to comment on something that I'm not really well versed on.
And that's totally fine, and we always appreciate that candor from our guests.
Sure.
Let me ask you this. You've given some tips. You said, if you're an end user who's maybe got some concerns, got some questions, make sure that you control your data and your storage at home on site. Are there any other tips you would give to end users who, want to use this technology, but also perhaps want to use it in a way that they feel is, fully self-controlled?
Yeah, absolutely. The main thing is own your data. In all of what we're talking about, it's a fear of sharing your data, owning your data, and people using your data without your permission. So the way to overcome that is, first of all, I believe that there's a little bit too much on the single camera use, meaning a doorbell camera. That's not really security. It's more for observation. You get a package delivered, someone rings a doorbell. It has its place, don't get me wrong, but it should be a part of a larger ecosystem. You have multiple entrances, you have ingress and egress of your home, you have driveways, you have walkways, you have front, back, sides of your home. All of them should be covered. So I think twofold, if I was to make a recommendation to your listeners, would be, get a real surveillance system, not just a Wi-Fi connected cloud storage plan. Get a system that records on site. You don't need an expensive system. You don't need to get 100 cameras on your home. But if you put 4 or 6 cameras, you'll get all of your ingress, egress. You'll get your walkway, your front, your side. And then what you'll have is an NVR, which is a network video recorder. And that'll take all of these cameras, and it's an internal device. It does not transmit to the cloud. It stores them all on a hard drive, whether that be solid state or spinning. And that can give you months, if not years worth of data, depending on your needs. Cloud storage has its place. We use it. It's mostly for redundancy and overlap. But I think the main recommendation would be keep your storage on site. That doesn't mean you don't have privy to it remotely. You still can go through applications or desktop software. You can view it. You can get playback. You can do all the alerts. And there's nothing that a cloud plan offers that local storage doesn't. The differentiator is when you archive the data, you're archiving it from your home. It's being stored on a device that's inside of your house. It's not being transmitted out. And I think another relevant point to that is we rely on the internet for almost everything. And when the internet goes out or Wi-Fi goes out and you only have a cloud storage plan, then, your information does not ever make it to the cloud. So I think those would be some good recommendations for your listeners.
Matt Saylor, CEO of IC Realtime. We appreciate it very much. Thanks for your time, sir.
Of course. Thank you for having me.